The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Valiant. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the main viewing window, watching the distant light of Kepler 442 grow larger as his ship moved through space. The massive supercarrier hummed with quiet power around him. 12,000 crew members worked at their stations throughout the ship, each one doing their part to keep humanity's greatest weapon running smoothly. Jake had been captain of the Valiant for 3 years now. He was 42 years old and had fought in the Martian colonial wars when he was younger. Those battles had taught him how to lead people when things got tough. Now he commanded the biggest and most advanced ship humanity had ever built. The Valiant was more than just a ship. It was a floating city in space. The vessel stretched nearly 2 miles from front to back and carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Its hangars held 500 fighter craft. Its weapons could punch holes through asteroid fields. Most importantly, it had the newest quantum drive system that could jump the ship across vast distances in seconds. "Captain, we're approaching the jump point," said Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. She was the ship's navigation officer, a young woman from the Mars colonies who had graduated top of her class from the Space Academy. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panels as she prepared the ship for its next hyperspace jump. Jake nodded and walked to his command chair in the center of the bridge. Around him, dozens of officers worked at their stations. The bridge was designed like a circle, with the captain's chair at the center so he could see everything that was happening. Large screens showed star maps, engine readings, and views of space around the ship. "Take us to jump readiness," Jake ordered. He had made the same command hundreds of times before. Jumping through hyperspace was routine now. Humanity had been using the technology for over 50 years. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez checked her instruments one more time. She was a small woman with quick hands and an even quicker mind. She had designed many of the improvements to the Valiant's quantum drive system herself. The engine room was her domain, filled with massive machines that could bend space and time. "All systems show green," she reported over the communication system. "Quantum drive is ready for jump sequence." Lisa had been working on something new for the past few months. The quantum drive was powerful, but she believed it could be even better. She had been running tests on a new energy matrix that could make their jumps faster and more accurate. Today's jump would be the perfect time to test her improvements. "Engineering. Reports ready," called out Commander Ryan Davis, the ship's first officer. Ryan was Jake's oldest friend and had served with him since their early days in the Colonial Defense Fleet. He was the kind of man who never got excited about anything, which made him perfect for handling the daily operations of such a large ship. Jake looked around the bridge one more time. Everything seemed normal. The crew was alert and ready. The ship's systems all showed green lights. It should have been just another routine jump to the next patrol zone. "Begin jump sequence," Jake ordered. Amy's hands moved over her controls. Jump sequence initiated. Drive charging to full power. Throughout the ship, the crew felt the familiar vibration as the quantum drive built up energy. The lights dimmed slightly as power flowed from the main reactors to the drive system. In the engine room, Lisa watched her instruments carefully. The new energy matrix was working perfectly, even better than she had hoped. "Drive at 75%, Amy reported. "Jump in 30 seconds. The vibration grew stronger. Some of the newer crew members gripped their chairs tighter, but the veterans barely noticed. Jake had made thousands of hyperspace jumps in his career. The process had become as familiar as breathing. "Drive at 90%, Amy called out. "Jump in 15 seconds. In the engine room, Lisa noticed something strange on her instruments. The energy readings were higher than they should be. Much higher. The new matrix was working too well, feeding more power into the drive than the system was designed to handle. Drive. At 100%, Amy announced. Jump in 5 seconds. Lisa's eyes went wide as she saw the energy readings spike beyond anything she had ever seen. She reached for the emergency shutdown controls, but it was too late. The quantum drive had already passed the point of no return. 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. Amy counted down. Instead of the usual smooth transition into hyperspace, the Valiant was suddenly surrounded by blinding blue-white light. The light came from everywhere at once, passing through the hull as if it were made of glass. On the bridge, Jake felt his hair stand on end as strange energy filled the air. What's happening? Ryan shouted over the growing noise of the drive system. Lisa's voice came over the communication system, filled with panic. Captain, we have massive energy fluctuations in the drive core. I'm reading power levels that shouldn't be possible. The new matrix is causing some kind of chain reaction. The blue-white light grew brighter and brighter until no one could see anything else. The ship shook violently, throwing crew members from their chairs. Alarms began to sound throughout the vessel as systems overloaded from the massive energy. Surge. Jake tried to give orders, but the noise was too loud. The light was so bright it hurt to look at, even with eyes closed. He could feel the Valiant being pulled in directions that didn't exist, stretched across space in ways that made no sense. In the engine room, Lisa watched helplessly as her instruments went crazy. The quantum drive was tearing holes in reality itself. She had wanted to make the system more powerful, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The ship was being pulled into something that wasn't normal space or hyperspace. The last thing Jake remembered before everything went white was the sound of Amy's voice calling out jump coordinates that made no sense. Numbers that described places that couldn't exist. Then the bridge, the ship, and everything he knew disappeared into the impossible light. From the tracking stations on Luna Base, operators watched their screens in confusion. The Valiant signal had simply vanished. One moment the massive ship was there, preparing for a routine jump. The next moment, there was nothing. No debris, no energy signature, no trace that the ship had ever existed. Admiral Kevin Burke received the report 20 minutes later. The most advanced ship in the human fleet, along with 12,000 of their best people, had simply disappeared. Search ships were already being sent to the last known location, but deep down, Kevin knew they would find nothing. The golden age of human expansion had just come to a sudden and mysterious end. 50 years had passed since the Valiant disappeared, and the galaxy had become a much darker place for humanity. The golden age of exploration and expansion was nothing but a memory now. Instead of building new colonies and reaching for distant stars, humans spent their days fighting for survival against an enemy that wanted them completely wiped out. The Zephyrian Collective had appeared in human space 7 years ago. They came without warning, without attempts to communicate, and without mercy. Their ships were sleek and deadly, covered in dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that could cut through the strongest. Human armor like it was paper. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge of the U.E.S. Defender, one of the last remaining ships in the human fleet. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death. The Defender was a good ship, but it was nothing compared to what the Valiant had been. Patricia remembered the great Supercarrier from her days as a young officer. She had served on it briefly before it vanished, and she still wondered what had happened to Captain Morrison and his crew. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Mars Defense Grid," said Commander Ben Taylor, the ship's communication officer. His voice was tense. Every report these days brought bad news. The Zephyrian fleet has broken through the outer defenses. They're heading straight for the shipyards. Patricia closed her eyes for a moment. The Mars shipyards were humanity's last major construction facility. They had been building ships there for over a century. If the Zephyrians destroyed them, humanity would lose its ability to replace the ships they kept losing in battle. "How many ships do they have?" Patricia asked. "Long-range sensors show at least 300 vessels," Ben replied. "Maybe more. The interference from their engines makes it hard to get an exact count. 300 ships." Patricia's entire fleet had only 47 vessels left, and most of those were damaged from previous battles. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity was outnumbered almost 7-1 in the pilot-ready room of the Defender. Commander Ryan Davis briefed his squadron for what might be their last mission. Ryan was not the same man who had served as first officer on the Valiant 50. Years ago. This Ryan was younger, the son of the original Ryan Davis, but he had inherited his father's steady nerves and tactical mind. "Listen up, Iron Eagles," Ryan said to the 12 pilots sitting in front of him. "The Zephyrians are making their move on Mars. Command wants us to slow them down while the evacuation ships get clear." The pilots looked tired. They had been fighting this war for 7 years, watching their friends die and their colonies burn. Most of them were barely 25 years old, but they had the eyes of much older people. War had a way of aging you fast. "Sir, what about reinforcements?" asked Lieutenant Carol Stone, one of the youngest pilots in the squadron. She had joined the fleet just 6 months ago. Fresh from the academy on Europa, that Ryan shook his head. "There are no reinforcements, Carol. This is it. We're all that's left." The silence in the room was heavy. Everyone knew the situation was hopeless, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. They were soldiers, and soldiers kept fighting, even when the odds were impossible. On Earth, President Nicole Foster stood before the United Earth Council in an emergency session. The council chamber was half empty. Many representatives had already fled to the outer colonies, hoping to escape the coming destruction. Those who remained sat in grim silence as Nicole delivered her report. "The Zephyrian main fleet has entered the solar system," Nicole said. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly as she held her notes. "Our defensive lines have fallen. Mars will likely be overrun within hours. Earth will be their next target." The president was a small woman in her 50s who had never wanted to lead during wartime. She had been elected to focus on peaceful expansion and economic growth. Instead, she found herself managing humanity's extinction. "What are options?" asked Senator Bill Murphy from the New York sector. He was an old man who remembered when humanity thought the galaxy belonged to them. "We have begun evacuating major population centers," Nicole replied, "but there aren't enough ships to move everyone. Most of our transport vessels were destroyed defending the outer colonies." The truth hung in the air like a weight. Earth had 11 billion people. The evacuation ships could maybe save 50 million. The rest would have to face whatever the Zephyrians had planned for humanity. In space near Mars, the battle was already beginning. The human defense fleet moved to intercept the Zephyrian armada, but it was like watching a small dog attack a giant. The alien ships were bigger, faster, and had weapons that made human technology look like toys from a children's playground. Commander Gary Lewis commanded the defense station orbiting Mars. His job was to coordinate the planetary defenses and buy time for the civilian evacuation. The station's weapons were powerful, but there were only 6 of them against hundreds of enemy ships. "All stations, this is Mars Control," Gary announced over the communication system. "Enemy fleet is in range. Begin firing sequence." The massive defense guns opened fire, sending streams of energy toward the approaching aliens. For a moment, it looked like the humans might have a chance. Several Zephyrian ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. But then the return fire came. The alien weapons were beyond anything humans had ever seen. They fired concentrated beams that seemed to tear holes in space itself. When they hit the defense stations, The massive structures simply vanished, leaving nothing but empty space where they had been. On the surface of Mars, people watched the battle through the transparent domes of their cities. They could see the flashes of light in the sky as ships died. Most of them knew they were watching the end of human civilization. Dr. Helen Carter worked frantically in her laboratory under New Shanghai, trying to finish a project that might save some small part of humanity's knowledge. She was downloading the entire contents of human libraries and databases onto portable storage devices. If anyone survived, they would need this information to rebuild. Helen was Amy Carter's older sister, though she had not seen Amy since the Valiant disappeared. She often wondered if her sister was still alive somewhere in the darkness between stars. The thought gave her comfort during these dark times. The Zephyrian fleet moved through the Mars defenses like they were not even there. Their ships landed on the planet's surface and began systematically destroying everything humans had built. Factories, homes, schools, hospitals, nothing was spared. The aliens seemed determined to erase every trace of human presence from the galaxy. As reports came in from Mars, people on Earth looked up at the night sky and waited. They knew the enemy would come for them next. Some prayed, some cried, and some just held their families close. But all of them wondered the same thing. Where were the heroes who could save them? Where was the miracle that would turn this hopeless war around? The answer was still traveling through impossible spaces. But it would arrive soon. The space between Mars and the asteroid belt had always been empty and quiet. Ships passed through it regularly, but there was nothing special about this region of space. That changed in an instant when reality itself began to tear apart. It started as a small ripple, like a stone dropped in still water. The sensors on every ship in the solar system began screaming warnings. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the instruments could measure. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting in ways that should not have been possible. Admiral Patricia Hayes was on the bridge of the Defender when the alerts started coming in. She had been preparing her ships for the final retreat to Earth when her science officer shouted across the bridge, "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy distortions near the asteroid belt," Lieutenant Mark Johnson called out. His voice was filled with confusion and fear. "The readings don't make any sense. It's like space is breaking apart." Patricia moved to the science station and looked at the displays. The numbers were impossible. The energy levels showed forces that could destroy entire planets. "What could cause something like this?" she asked. "I don't know, Admiral," Mark replied. "I've never seen anything like it. The Zephyrians aren't showing any reaction to it either. Their fleet has stopped moving toward Earth." On the Zephyrian command ship, General Vex watched the same energy readings with growing alarm. The Zephyrians had conquered dozens of star systems and seen many different technologies. But this was beyond their understanding. Their ships had weapons that could crack moons, but the forces building up in space near Mars made their most powerful weapons look like toys. "What are the humans doing?" Vex demanded from his science commander. The general was a tall creature with 4 arms and skin like black metal. His race had never known fear until they encountered whatever was happening in human space. "This is not human technology," the science commander replied. "Our database has no record of any species capable of generating these energy levels. Something else is responsible for this phenomenon." The distortion grew larger and brighter. What had started as a small ripple now covered thousands of kilometers of space. The blue-white light that had swallowed the Valiant 50 years ago was returning, but now it was bigger and more powerful than before. On Earth, every observatory and tracking station turned their instruments toward the growing anomaly. Dr. Helen Carter watched the readings from her laboratory under New Shanghai. The energy signature looked familiar somehow, but she could not place where she had seen it before. "Computer, Search all historical records for similar energy patterns, she commanded. The artificial intelligence began scanning through 50 years of data, looking for anything that matched what they were seeing. Match found, the computer announced after several minutes. Energy pattern is 97% identical to readings recorded during the disappearance of the U's Valiant 50 years ago. Helen's heart stopped. The Valiant. Her sister Amy had been on that ship when it vanished. Could this be connected somehow? Was it possible that the great Supercarrier was somehow returning? The light grew brighter and brighter until it could be seen with the naked eye from the surface of Mars. The Zephyrian invasion force had stopped their attack completely, turning their attention to the impossible phenomenon occurring in space above them. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light started to fade. But something was emerging from within the brilliant glow. It was massive, larger than any ship that had ever been built. As the light dimmed, the shape became clearer. It was the U's Valiant, but it was transformed. The ship that emerged from the light was the same vessel that had disappeared 50 years ago, but it had grown. What had once been a 2-mile-long supercarrier was now nearly 3 miles from front to back. Its hull gleamed with the same blue-white energy that had surrounded it during its return. Strange new weapon systems covered its surface, technologies that looked nothing like human engineering. The bridge of the Defender, Patricia stared at the impossible sight. "Communications, try to contact that ship," she ordered. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Admiral," the communication officer replied. He sent out a standard hailing frequency, not really expecting a response. To his amazement, the reply came immediately. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the U's Valiant, responding to Admiral Hayes," came a voice that Patricia recognized, even though it should have been impossible. Jake Morrison should have been an old man by now, if he was even still alive. "Jake?" Patricia said into the communication system. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Patricia," Jake's voice replied. "I know this must be confusing. We have a lot to explain, but first we need to deal with those Zephyrian ships. We've been watching the situation, and we're here to help." On the bridge of the Valiant, Jake Morrison stood exactly as he had 50 years ago. He had not aged a single day during the ship's displacement. Neither had any of his crew. Time had moved differently in the place they had been, and they had experienced only months while decades passed in normal space. But those months had not been wasted. Strange realm they had been trapped in was filled with knowledge and technology that was far beyond human understanding. The ship's systems had been enhanced with new capabilities that seemed almost magical. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez worked at her station, monitoring systems that she had never imagined possible. The quantum drive that had caused their displacement had been rebuilt using principles that existed only in the dimensional void where they had been trapped. Their weapons now fired projectiles made of concentrated dark matter. Their shields could absorb any form of energy and redirect it back at attackers. "Captain, all systems are operating at maximum efficiency," Lisa reported. "The new upgrades are performing perfectly. We're ready for combat." Lieutenant Amy Carter, still young and eager after 50 years in the void, worked at her navigation station. She had learned to pilot the ship through dimensions that normal physics said could not exist. Moving through regular space felt simple. "Now, navigation is ready, Captain," Amy announced. "I'm detecting the Zephyrian fleet. 312 ships, arranged in a standard attack formation. They're moving away from Earth now, probably confused by our arrival." Jake nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We have returned to find our people in danger. The enemy that threatens humanity will learn why they should fear us. We are not the same ship that left 50 years ago. We are something new, something stronger. Today, we remind the galaxy that humanity does not surrender." Throughout the Valiant, 12,000 crew members prepared for battle. They had trained in the dimensional void, learning to use weapons and technologies that came from beyond normal space. They were still human, but they had become something more. The Zephyrian fleet began to turn toward the Valiant, but their movements seemed slow and clumsy compared to the enhanced reflexes of the returned supercarrier. The battle that would decide humanity's fate was about to begin. Jake looked out at the stars and smiled. They had been gone for 50 years, but they had returned at exactly the right moment. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon had come home. The battle began when the Zephyrian fleet opened fire on the Valiant. 300 alien ships launched everything they had at the returned supercarrier. Energy beams that could destroy planets struck the Valiant's hull, but something impossible happened. The ship's shields absorbed every attack and glowed brighter with each hit. Captain Jake Morrison watched from his bridge as the enemy weapons struck his ship harmlessly. The new shield technology they had learned in the dimensional void was working perfectly. All fighters launch, he ordered calmly. Show them what we learned while we were away. The Valiant's hangar bays opened, and 500 fighters poured out into space. But these were not the same fighters that had disappeared 50 years ago. Each one gleamed with the same blue-white energy as the mothership. The pilots who flew them had gained decades of experience during their months in the void. Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter coordinated the fighter attack from her station. Her fingers moved over controls that seemed to bend space itself. All wings, engage the enemy fleet. Remember your training from the other realm. Use the new weapon systems. Human fighters moved through space like nothing the Zephyrians had ever seen. They could change direction instantly, as if the laws of physics did not apply to them. Their weapons fired streams of dark matter that could cut through any armor. Within minutes, dozens of alien ships were exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Admiral Patricia Hayes watched the battle from the Defender in amazement. The human fighters were destroying Zephyrian ships faster than her instruments could count. How is this possible? She whispered to herself. General Vex commanded the Zephyrian fleet from his flagship, but he was losing control of the battle. His ships were being destroyed by technology he did not understand. The human fighters moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing faster than his gunners could track them. All ships focus fire on the large human vessel, Vex ordered. If we destroy their command ship, the smaller craft will be helpless. 100 Zephyrian ships turned their weapons toward the Valiant and fired at once. The combined attack was strong enough to vaporize a moon, but the supercarrier shields held firm. The energy from the alien weapons was absorbed and stored, making the shields even stronger. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez monitored the shield systems from her station in the engine room. The technology they had learned in the dimensional void was working better than she had hoped. Captain, enemy fire is actually making our shields stronger. Their energy is being converted and added to our power reserves. Jake smiled. The aliens had no idea what they were fighting. Engineering, prepare the main weapon. Let's show them what real power looks like. The Valiant had been equipped with a new weapon system during its time in the void. The main gun could fire concentrated dark matter projectiles that could punch holes through space itself. Lisa began charging the weapon, drawing power from the ship's enhanced reactors. On Earth, President Nicole Foster watched the battle through the long-range sensors. For the first time in 7 years, she felt hope. The impossible return of the Valiant was turning the tide of the war. Madam President, we're receiving communication from the Valiant, reported her aide. Captain Morrison wants to speak with you. Nicole nodded and activated the communication system. Jake's face appeared on the screen, looking exactly as he had 50 years ago. Mr. President, this is Captain Morrison. We're going to end this war today, but we need you to prepare for what comes next. What do you mean, Captain? Nicole asked. The technology we've brought back will change everything, Jake replied. Humanity will never be helpless again, but we'll need wise leaders to guide us into the future. The galaxy is much bigger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. The battle continued to rage around the Valiant. Commander Ryan Davis led his squadron of fighters against the Zephyrian fleet, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge enemy fire that should have been impossible to avoid. His weapons tore through alien ships like they were made of paper. Iron Eagles, form up on me, Ryan called to his pilots. We're going to take out their command ship. The squadron dove toward the Zephyrian flagship, a massive vessel 3 times the size of any human ship. The alien vessel's weapons tracked them, but the human fighters moved too fast and too unpredictably to hit. Carl Stone, the young pilot, who had joined the squadron only months ago, found herself flying better than pilots with decades of experience. The time in the dimensional void had changed all of them, giving them knowledge and abilities they had never possessed before. Target acquired, Carl announced as she lined up her shot on the enemy flagship, firing dark matter torpedo. The weapon struck the Zephyrian command ship and tore a hole completely through its hull. The massive vessel began to break apart, its structure unable to handle the damage from the exotic weapon. General Vex felt his ship dying around him. His race had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. The humans had returned with power that seemed to come from the gods themselves. All ships retreat, Vex ordered. We cannot win this battle. The humans have become something beyond our ability to fight. But Jake Morrison was not going to let the aliens escape to threaten other worlds. All ships, pursue the enemy fleet, he commanded. We end this here and now. The Valiant's main weapon finished charging. Lisa Rodriguez had built up enough power to destroy an entire star system. Main gun ready to fire, Captain, she reported. Fire, Jake ordered. The dark matter projectile that erupted from the Valiant's main gun was like nothing that had ever been seen in the galaxy. It moved faster than light itself, striking the retreating Zephyrian fleet and creating an explosion that could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. When the light faded, the alien fleet was gone. The war was over. In the weeks that followed, the Valiant shared its new technology with the remaining human fleet. Ships were rebuilt with enhanced weapons and shields. Humanity began to explore the galaxy again, but this time they were prepared for the dangers they might find. Jake Morrison met with world leaders to explain what had happened during the ship's 50-year absence. They had been trapped in a dimension where different laws of physics applied, where time moved differently, and where technology existed that was far beyond normal understanding. Lisa Rodriguez worked with human scientists to help them understand the new systems. The quantum drive that had caused their displacement could now be controlled, allowing ships to travel instantly across the galaxy. Humanity would never again be limited to one small corner of space. Amy Carter took command of a new exploration fleet, using her knowledge of dimensional navigation to guide humanity into the unknown. The stars that had once seemed so far away were now within easy reach. The Valiant had returned when all seemed lost, bringing with it the power and knowledge that humanity needed to not just survive, but to thrive among the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but humans were no longer afraid. They had learned the most important lesson of all. No matter how dark things became, humanity would never surrender. They would always find a way to fight back, to grow stronger, and to claim their place among the stars. The age of human expansion had begun again, and this time nothing would stop them.